Hi, I'm Jeremy Crosby.
And I'm Nick Boucher. We're the hosts for the program that's all about your city, Talking Fitchburg.
Every day, we pull together the news, events, and information you need to stay on top of what's happening in the city of Fitchburg.
Find Talking Fitchburg on cable TV, Roku, Amazon Fire, Apple TV, and our live stream on the web. Plus, you can view all our headlines and stories on Facebook, YouTube, and our video on demand service. This is your city.
Keep up with Talking Fitchburg and the issues that affect you and your neighbors.
Want to know what's happening in your city? Get Notify Me messages from the City of Fitchburg. Visit fitchburgwi.gov on your computer or mobile device and select the big Notify Me button on the left. Enter your email and/or phone number, whichever is best for you to get notifications. Scroll down the list and select all the topics you're interested in to receive email or text messages about. You'll be notified every time one of your topics is updated. Sign up for Notify Me, one more way to keep up with your Fitchburg government.
I call to order the meeting of the Committee of the Whole on August 28th, 2024 at 7:07 p.m. First item of business is Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next item is roll call.
Good evening, everyone. Alder Allen.
Present.
Mayor Aradafrada. Here. Alder Dantzler is absent with excuse. Alder Gerhardt.
Here.
Alder Herbst.
Here.
Alder Jetzer.
Here.
Alder Maldonado.
Here.
Alder Vafadari.
Here.
And Alder Wheeler is also absent with excuse. You do have a quorum.
Thank you. We can move on to item 4, approval of minutes. I'd entertain a motion on the July 4th, 2024 draft minutes.
So moved.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Moved by Alder Allen. Any comments, questions? All in favor of the draft, approving the draft minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, nay. Motion carries. Moving on to item 5, public appearances for non-agenda items. I don't believe we have anybody in chambers or online. So we can move right on to agenda items. 6A, Sustainability Plan Update and Discussion. And I turn it over to Phil.
Thank you. I think I know almost everybody in this room, but I'll give the introduction anyway. I'm Phil Groupie. I'm the Sustainability Specialist with the City of Fitchburg. We're also joined by Ted Redmond with Pale Blue Dot, who's joining us virtually from St. Paul. We've been working for the better part of a year and a half on a sustainability plan that was initiated quite a long time ago, but budgeted for the 2023 and 24 calendar years. We've been working pretty diligently on that. We're at a point where we have a draft sustainability plan. I shared it with council and the mayor to review and provide some commentary, but we also wanted to bring this to Committee of the Whole and just give a chance to give a little bit of the background for this process, where the plan is at right now, what's in there, what we've been learning, and then also talk a little about implementation and get a chance to get some direct feedback from all of you. So I'm going to talk for the first 5 to 10, hopefully on the shorter side of that, minutes, turn it over to Ted for a little bit, and then just open it up for discussion. What I want to focus on is kind of talking about the impetus for this plan, where this originated, and then kind of give a little bit of a tease on the implementation steps that we're going to be looking at going forward, and then Ted will talk more about the process of the plan and what's actually contained within it. So I've got slides up here. I don't know. I'm seeing the presenter view, and I hope that's not what's going to be shared on the screens for you. Great.
We see the regular slides.
Really broadly speaking, if it's not a concept that you've spent a lot of time thinking about, what is sustainability? My background is in environmental work. I did environmental education. I got into some energy efficiency consulting. Environmental responsibility, environmental preservation is kind of at the core of sustainability. The reason that I was drawn to it as a career field is that it really loops in the economic viability that we're really trying to achieve in society, but also social equity. what is the reason that we're preserving this environment? Some of it is for its own sake. Some of it is because of the dependencies between the natural world and the human one. So we talk about this three-legged stool of social progress, economic development, and environmental responsibility. People, planet, and profit is a shorthand way of referring to it. I really like the diagram at the lower middle here, where you see that the economy that we try to keep strong is embedded within our social world, within our communities. Those communities are all embedded within the natural world as well, within the environment. And so sustainability is really just about recognizing these linkages and trying to make sure that whatever we do, we're doing it in a way that we can perpetuate for years to come, hand it down generation after generation. There's a lot of different ways of looking at it. The United Nations has a list of 17 different sustainable goals. A lot of those are things that we're trying to mirror here in a smaller community as well. Obviously, we have a different capacity for pursuing those than do nations, and especially international cooperation. But a lot of these things you will see paralleled to a smaller degree in our plan and a lot of other community sustainability plans. A little bit of the background for where we came from as a city to get to this point. The one thing I don't have in here is that Fitchburg talks about being Wisconsin's recycling leader. We were one of the first communities to really implement a citywide recycling program well over 20 years ago now. So we've been an environmental leader within Wisconsin for quite a while. Joined Governor Doyle's Energy Independent Communities Pledge back in 2009. Joined a DNR initiative called the Greens Here Legacy Communities, which is really about sharing resources and collaborating and learning from each other on a state level. Joined that in 2010. We've had a number of different successes here without detailing them all out over the years, from looking at energy to water resources protection to biking and really trying to push alternate modes of transportation to cut down on emissions from vehicles and increase physical health. We've been recognized for it at the county level with Dane County's, the first year that they initiated Climate Champion Awards. We received 4 of those. We were one of only 2 applicants that year that got as many as 4 different designations, so we were really proud of that. And we've pursued the Healthy Neighborhoods Initiative, so again here we're really trying to bring in the social equity component of it, which has been more of a focus for Fitchburg in recent years, fortunately. But the thing that really led to, to our sustainability plan that we're talking about here is this 2019 Clean Energy Resolution. So this was pushed by the RCC, my predecessor, Ellen Geisler, and a couple of alders who provided support as well. And what this Clean Energy Resolution did was it set a number of goals for us as a city and as the broader community that we wanted to achieve in terms of first cutting down on energy use overall, and then pursuing renewable energy and emissions-free sources of energy to replace coal, natural gas, internal combustion engines, things like that, trying to essentially do our part as much as we can in a city of 30,000 to join the international effort to combat climate change. Internationally, this is right around the time that the Paris Climate Accords, or a few years after the Paris Climate Accords had been signed, where a number of countries said, here's what we think we can accomplish to try and mitigate the negative consequences of climate change. And then a lot of smaller communities said, all right, what's our piece of that pie? What's our responsibility to help push towards that effort? And that's what our Clean Energy Resolution really was all about, was reducing energy, renewable replacements. And we had a number of higher level goals in here. We didn't necessarily have a more targeted plan that set a path for how to get there. One of the final commitments within that Clean Energy Resolution, you can see the bottom bullet point here, was developing an energy and water plan that has resiliency, sustainability components. So that's something that council did 5 years ago, said that we're going to develop a energy, water, broadly a sustainability plan. And we've been working for several years now on making that a reality. Really briefly, I don't think I've shared much of this with council in the last year or two. I know I gave a more detailed presentation on this a few years back. But just to look at where we are right now, the energy is the one that we've spent the most amount of time working on. This is looking at our overall electricity sourcing by year, going back to 2018. So the Clean Energy Resolution set 2018 as our baseline year for a lot of these goals, 25% renewable by 25, 100% by 2030, cutting down per capita carbon emissions or per capita fossil fuel energy use 30% per capita by 2030. That's based on a 2018 baseline, so that's what I use for a lot of my diagrams. But here you can see, of course, Fitchburg has been growing. We've been adding operational needs. We've been adding facilities. So our total energy use has gone up, but our total fossil fuel energy use has actually gone down, and that's the gold bar here, as well as well, it's mostly just the gold bar is our fossil fuel emissions. So that's been decreasing. The blue and green are blue is net metered solar, so that's anything that we have on our facilities. We had a big project in 2017. We added to it with the East Fire Station in 2020. And so that's been holding pretty steady since then. Green is essentially the renewables that we're buying just by virtue of this being part of our utilities grid mix. And then orange is we bought into the O'Brien solar array that's over on Lacey Road a few years back. And so that's been a pretty significant contributor to our renewable energy as well. So we've passed our 25 by 25 already. We are on track to get well past 50% by 2030. The goal is 100%. We'd like to do everything we can to get there. Some of the other areas we've made some progress, there's that 39% of our municipal electricity from renewable sources. When you combine electricity and our fleet fuel, we're at 25% of that coming from renewable sources, with 2 EV Ford Lightnings in our fleet, a few more EVs on the way that stands to increase as well. And then an overall decrease, not just a per capita, but overall decrease in municipal fossil fuel emissions over the last 6 years. When you do a per capita decrease, so that 4% decrease along with a growing population, that per capita decrease looks even stronger.
Can I ask you a question
Sure.
right on that? When you're projecting this into the future, are you considering new buildings and new vehicles that the city may acquire, or are you just going on our 2024 inventory?
So there are no projections in there in terms of, do you mean in terms of like setting our future goals for, so I wasn't part of the 2019 Clean Energy Plan process. I know that within the sustainability plan, and Ted can speak to this a little bit better than I can, but there were considerations made for kind of what he refers to as the business as usual going forward. What do things look like? We don't have specific future projections right now for city operations, city energy usage. We certainly are aware that for instance, there's a substantial building project that's coming with the police services facility. There will be additional, as the city grows, the addition of parts of town of Madison were significant contributors to our energy usage. And so we did see an increase in overall municipal energy use when we absorbed those portions of the town of Madison. So we keep those things in mind. That is a big part of why we use per capita energy use as the benchmark for the fossil fuel emissions. It takes effort to decrease your per capita emissions. Decreasing your total overall energy use as the community grows is quite a bit more challenging. Would be a worthy goal, but would take a lot more focused effort for sure. But yeah, we do keep those things in mind, definitely.
Phil?
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm trying to understand. Are we looking at like just buildings and properties and facilities that the city runs? Or are we looking at homes, businesses?
Yeah, good question.
Like that?
So one of the major things I was tasked with when I was brought on board here was to track our clean energy resolution, our progress towards energy. So that is part of why I'm spending a bit of time here on the energy, the renewable energy. What I'm referring to here when I say municipal electricity, that is City of Fitchburg's fleet operations, buildings. So we're looking at street lights, stoplights, water utility, the municipal fleet. So we're not talking about the residential, the commercial and industrial community. Yeah, Bill.
Yeah, so similarly, when you say per capita, you mean per city employee then?
Per capita, we're referring to the entire population, just because that factors into all of those service deliveries. That factors into where we're putting streetlights and stoplights. If we're doing new road construction and adding stoplights, that's a reflection of the population growth of the entire city. So the per capita is, as the city passes 30, 31, 32,000, that's the number that I'm using as the
Okay, so
denominator.
it's not that people are using 13% less. It's that the city's expenditure per capita
Correct.
is 13% less.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. Dave?
In our pumping electricity, because that's the largest.
For the wells, yes.
Yeah, that's the largest
That is a
component of
significant
our
component,
electricity.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we've got, I don't have it in here. There's a really good tree chart that we got. There was a, from 2018 to 2020, we worked with several of our neighbors around Dane County and a third-party consultant, Slipstream, on a comprehensive energy reporting project. One of the graphs that we got from that process was a really cool tree diagram. If you're familiar, it's all of the different boxes making up a grid, and you can kind of see the relative size of everything to each other. And by far, the water utility was the most significant contributor to our overall electricity usage. Yeah.
So related to my last question, this probably isn't a scope of your work, but is there any way to see or know what kind of our carbon footprint as a city, including residents, including businesses, is? Like, does anybody keep track of that?
So that was part of the baseline document process that Ted and Pale Blue Dot went through.
Okay.
We can approximate it pretty well. We can get a much more precise number for the city of Fitchburg, just because we know all of the details of our energy use, our fleet use, our miles traveled. The most complicated thing, there's 3 different types of emissions that we'll talk about, or that are talked about in calculating your total footprint. One is Scope 1 emissions, and that's any time that emissions are generated on your property. So if we're looking at things like, when we're driving around, that's Scope 1 emissions. When we're burning natural gas for a gas furnace, that's a Scope 1 emission. Scope 2 emissions is any emissions that are coming from the electricity, the energy that you use. If we purchase energy from MG&E, from Alliant, any emissions that result from that electricity use, it's not on our property, but it's a direct result of those purchases. That's Scope 2 emissions. The really tough one is Scope 3. Now you're getting into things like products that are delivered to our door. What were the emissions involved in transporting and manufacturing those products? So a perfect calculation of the climate footprint is tough. We've got a pretty good number for the municipality. For the broader community, we're getting energy data from the utilities that serve Fitchburg. So we know electricity and gas numbers for the whole community in aggregate. And then we know roughly for the grid mix in the upper Midwest region what the proportion of coal and gas are, renewable energy, and then you can calculate an estimate of the total emissions that way. So we do have a carbon footprint estimate for Fitchburg that we used as part of this process. To move then back from the energy into the sustainability plan, because I want to focus as much as possible on the plan, and definitely happy to, I do a lot of analysis on energy throughout the year. Would be happy to share that in more detail with council as well at some point. I think that would be really interesting to look at and kind of get a sense of where we're using our energy and also how much money that we're spending on it. We are all aware that over the last few years there's been a lot of volatility in energy pricing. We don't expect that to disappear. So it's something to be aware of is the energy, where it's coming from and what we're spending on it. But for the sustainability plan specifically, I took it back to 2000 with the recycling work, 2009 with the Energy Independent Communities Pledge. But really, it begins more concretely with November of 2022 when council approved a budget to bring in a consultant to start a sustainability plan. So we started that process early in 2023, interviewed multiple consultants. We selected Pale Blue Dot and started working with them last year in the summer on background data collection. This was data for both the municipality and for the broader community of Fitchburg. We released a public survey in the fall of 2023, decided to keep it open for quite a long time to get as many responses as possible, really trying to get a sense of, within the broader Fitchburg community, what's people's current level of familiarity with sustainability concepts and climate change, what's their level of concern, how do they feel it's impacting them, and what do they think the city's role should be in addressing that. That's something that Ted can address as well with his slides. And then we really worked in earnest with a planning team of about 25 volunteer members who spent a lot of time working with us on crafting what you're going to see in the plan, which is, or what you've already seen if you looked through the draft plan, which is the different focus areas that we wanted to target with the sustainability plan, what the high-level goals were within each area, and then what are the actions that we think we could pursue either as a city or a broader community to try and reach those goals. Where we're at right now is that third dot from the end on the right, the draft review. So we've had a staff review. We've had this released to the public and gotten comments back from members of the public as well. Currently bringing it in front of committee of the whole, and the next step after this would be getting that final plan approved. We bring it to a few of the most relevant committees within Fitchburg, bring it back to council and talk about making this the city's first official sustainability plan. Then we get into implementation, and that would start next year. We need to have conversations internally about what that implementation looks like. There are several different directions it could go. But what I'm starting to work on right now is taking all of these actions that are in the draft plan, assuming those are going to be, if not exactly, then at least a pretty good approximation of the final set of actions, analyzing those from a number of different perspectives. What do I think the budgetary need for each one of these will be? What do I think the time investment will be? What sort of timeline are we looking at? Can we start it next year? Is it 3 or 4 years away? What are all the different departments within the city of Fitchburg, as well as external partners that I think would be involved in these actions? So really trying to make a comprehensive list of all of these factors that will go into prioritizing the implementation of the actions. What are the ones we're going to focus on for next year? What's going to be pushed into 26, 27, et cetera. Once I've gone through that exercise, then I'll work with Chad, I'll meet with departments, and we'll kind of talk through this and kind of create a list of how do we want to approach this and what is everyone's level of involvement going to be. Once we've gone through that, then we get into acting. We start pursuing these actions. We look for anything that needs additional resources. We look at for operational budget cycles for CIP. We look at grants. We look at partnerships. And then as we go along, we'll track our progress. We'll evaluate where we are and see if anything needs to be adjusted, and just kind of keep going through that cycle of plan out the next set of steps, act on them, and then evaluate how that went and what needs to happen next. So that's, spent the most time on where we have been to this point. Essentially, starting a week ago, my focus has mostly been on the implementation, is really making sure that once this plan is approved, we're ready to hit the ground running, and we don't have to spend the next 6 months now actually thinking about how to implement it. I want to be ready to action that as soon as possible. Certainly happy to answer any of the questions now, but otherwise I can just hand this right off to Ted, and he can talk through more of the specifics of the plan's process and the information within it.
Yeah, given the time constraints, let's keep moving down to Ted.
Right.
Thank you.
Great. Hello, everybody. I'm Ted Redmond with Pale Blue Dot. We are grateful to be able to be talking with you tonight. So Pale Blue Dot, brief introduction. We are a sustainability and climate action planning firm. Our mission is to hasten the transition to an authentically sustainable, no-carbon economy. So this is all that we do, primarily working at the municipal level. We are grateful for the work that we are able to do, and we are very grateful to be able to work with the city of Fitchburg. So thank you so much for that. Just to give you a sense of the process that we went through to create the draft sustainability plan. It's about an 18-month process. We're at about 16, 17 months now, so that's looking forward a bit into a final plan. But about an 18-month process, we created 5 foundational research documents. We believe in creating as much and collecting as much existing baseline data as possible so that we can all make hopefully better decisions. We also had 2 online surveys, one for initial input at the beginning of the process. And I have to say, by the way, Fitchburg we do input surveys on almost all of our projects, and Fitchburg is our current per capita winner on that. So that's something to be proud of. We do have a tribal nation we're currently working on that is fast gaining right now, but if they surpass Fitchburg, I think we can still say you're the municipal winner. So, but in addition to broad community input, this planning process was focused on a highly collaborative planning team. The planning team consisted of city staff, as well as a number of volunteers. These folks really co-authored, co-created the draft plan that's been brought to you. And it was a lot of work. So these folks did a lot of effort on behalf of their community, meeting multiple times over about an 8-month period. And I just can't speak enough about how wonderful it was to work with them and how much work they did. So to date, we've had input from over 580 community members. That second survey relative to the draft plan is still open. So hopefully that number will continue to grow. So I mentioned that we had foundational research documents. There were 4 core foundation research documents that included a vulnerability assessment, a greenhouse gas inventory and forecast document, a ground cover study, just looking at what types of ground cover do we have, trees, lawns, native grasses, agriculture, etc. And also a high-level renewable energy potential study. How much rooftop solar might we get? That sort of information. All of that content then was put into a baseline assessment. This baseline assessment organized the information that we found into sectors. Each of the sectors that are in the draft plan kind of summarized that information and then provided preliminary starter goals. And the intent of all of this document, especially the baseline assessment, was to give the collaborative planning team a place to start the conversation. So it was just a place to start, and the collaborative team was able to explore other goal ideas and arrive at their suggested draft goals. I want to give you just a couple of highlights from some of the baseline efforts and survey efforts. This diagram here is the state of Wisconsin's annual temperatures, the trends from 1895 on the far left side through 2021. This graphic is put together by a group called Climate Stripes. And each one of those stripes represents a year. And if it's a blue or bluish line, it is a cool or colder than average year. If it's a pinkish or dark red line, then it's a warm or hotter than average year. You can definitely perceive just visually the trend that we have experienced towards warming, especially over the last 30 years or so. Globally, looking at the top 25 hottest years on record, they all are since 1997. 23 of those 25 hottest years have all occurred in this century, which is really quite something considering that we are just in the 24th year of this century. And in fact, the hottest of all years, the hottest 10 have been the last 10 years. As we look at our projected future for Fitchburg, these all come from the National Climate Assessment, by the way. They have a tool called the Climate Explorer. This uses the forecast, which is known as the business as usual forecast. That business as usual forecast, scientists have been indicating over the last handful of years that business as usual forecast is actually, or model, I should say, climate model, is actually tracking closer than any of the other models currently. And they think that it might be the closest model for the mid-century projections. However, the end of century projections are considered to be a future that might be only. So in other words, if we are successful at reducing our global emissions, that end of century projection could be higher than what we actually experience. So the reason why it's very important to ground ourselves in some of these projections is just to understand that both addressing adaptation and resilience is very important, because those mid-century projections are potentially all but certain. However, while we are building resilience and adaptation, working on reducing our emissions becomes equally important, because that is really our number one long-term adaptation strategy, because we might be able to bend the curve downward for that second half of the century, so that our children and our children's children may not have such a bleak future. We did greenhouse gas inventory. We covered 3 subject years. We did that so we could get a little bit of sense of trends. The emissions were calculated, this is community-wide. We also did municipal operations, but community-wide, the major categories are transportation, our buildings and energy, so that's electricity as well as heating fuel, solid waste management, and also water and wastewater. For 2022, our total emissions, I tend to equate these into volumetric numbers, because I find that interesting, and people don't think about the idea that we're actually adding atmosphere. So 1 year's worth of Fitchburg emissions is equal to about 8.2 billion cubic feet of human-made greenhouse gas emissions. So it's a cube that's roughly 2,000 feet on a side. This image here, we're seeing the cube from almost 2 miles away. So I indicated that we've done a couple surveys, the intake survey as well as community meetings initially. We had a number of responses, and just wanted to share a little bit about what we heard. First of all, 96% of survey respondents have noticed signs of climate change. And interestingly, 89% reported having been personally impacted by one or more of those effects of climate change. That's something that's quite striking. When we ask folks out on the street, usually people think, well, yeah, climate change is going to affect humanity, but I don't think it's going to affect me personally. And honestly, this is pretty consistent. We tend to get something similar to this in most of our communities. So it is an indication that we are already experiencing some impacts, and we should expect those impacts to increase at least through mid-century before we're able to reduce our emissions here globally and locally. Survey respondents indicated that over 92% of the respondents indicated being concerned, moderately, very, or extremely concerned about climate change. Their areas of concern, we asked about availability of drinking water. Are they concerned about air quality impacts, ecosystem loss, tree plant loss? Are there risks to vulnerable populations, et cetera? And you can see their responses, kind of an overwhelming majority of respondents being moderately, very, or extremely concerned about potential impacts in each of those areas, with vulnerable populations and tree and plant loss edging out for the lead, so to speak. There were 4 basic themes of the responses that we received. The first is that Fitchburg residents support municipal action and leadership. They're happy that the city is pursuing this. At least the respondents that took the survey are happy that the city is doing this, and they believe that there's a need and a role for leadership. Residents want to see more renewable energy, and they want to see greenhouse gas emission reductions. Community members are also concerned about climate change overall and the risks, as I've indicated. And respondents have indicated that natural resource conservation is widely supported. So the plan itself is structured around 8 sectors. Those 8 sectors are transportation, buildings and energy, waste management, water and wastewater, local food and agriculture, green space ecosystems, health and safety, and sustainable economy. Those 8 sectors together have a total of 46 strategies or goals, goal-type statements. Each of those strategies then are supported by detailed actions that can be implemented over a 6-year implementation timeframe, so through 2030. I'll give you just a highlight of each of the sectors here, and then happy to answer any questions, or we can back up and go through anything anybody wants. But in the transportation and land use sector, we've got 5 primary goals: reducing greenhouse gas emissions, decreasing overall vehicle miles traveled, supporting that through an increase in public transit use, and also focusing on transitioning to zero emission vehicles, such as electric vehicles, and also an increase in population density. So focusing development as appropriately as possible into areas that are already developed to the best extent possible in order to protect green spaces, open spaces, quality agriculture land, etc. In the buildings and energy sector, there are also 5 goals there: reduce greenhouse gas emissions, a reduction in electric use, and a higher reduction in natural gas use, which is in part due to energy efficiency goals, as well as electrification or transitioning from on-site combustion to electrification or non-fossil fuel combustion. We also have an goals for increased renewable energy, and a decrease in people within Fitchburg that are living within energy poverty. So those are folks that are paying more than 6% of their gross income on energy.
I have a question, if you can look at that last slide. So there's 2 that say negative 33% and negative 7%, and one says 30% reduction. What is? Are my double negatives messed up, or?
Yeah, I'm sorry. That's from the draft, and we're going to be correcting that for the final.
Okay.
So they'll all be positive numbers, but you'll see that it'll be a reduction or decrease or drop. So those first 3 are still intended to be reductions, but we're going to get rid of the double negatives there. I'm sorry about that. In the waste management sector, we've got 4 goals: decreasing overall greenhouse gas emissions, a decrease in total solid waste generated, and an increase in organics diversion. So getting organics, food waste, and other organics materials out of our standard landfill stream, getting it into composting and other organics recycling methodologies, and then also increasing overall recycling, so getting glass, aluminum, paper, etc. out.
I have a question.
In our water,
I have a question. What does it mean, organics diversion?
So organics would be, whenever we talk about diversion in waste management, what we're trying to do is to rather than having that waste go into landfills, getting it into a recycling or some reuse kind of format. In organics, the recycling, quote unquote, is to get it into organics diversion where we could compost. You can do that through industrial composting where they can create soil out of it, or you can do backyard composting.
Ted, just a follow-up question on that. Would this recommendation mean like implementing some sort of an organics collection program, or would it mean encouraging more people to like personally because I know that's harder depending on who you are and like where you live, and I know there have been cities that have implemented like organic collection.
Yes, it's kind of all of the above. There are a number of actions that support each of these, and so part of it's education, part of it is exploring opportunities for backyard composting, compost collection, drop-off sites, organized organics collection, so kind of all of the above.
I have a question as well. One of the things I'm interested in here is, I don't know if this is included in one of the 4 points, but I would love to see an effort to reduce the amount of waste we're creating in our waste collection. So I live in Seminole Forest, and Pelletary does not accept like loose leaf pickup is not structured around that. So like my neighbors will have like 80 bags of leaves, and most of them have so many leaves that they use plastic. We use reusable bags, but that does mean most of our leaves don't get picked up. And I do think for some of our neighborhoods, it's a huge problem. So I would love to see that addressed as well, because I think the process in which we're managing our waste is actually creating more waste.
That's a great point. Thank you.
Ted, question on those last two numbers there. When you say 1.8x increase and 1.4x increase, do you mean 180% and 140%, or do you mean 80% and 40%?
Yeah. So it's an 80%. So we end up at.
So it's a 0.8x increase,
times the
landing us at 1.8,
Yeah.
the current number.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you. In the water and wastewater sector, we have 4 overall goals: reducing greenhouse gas emissions, reducing our water consumption, so water conservation strategies, and a commensurate reduction of wastewater generation, which is really the large driver for our greenhouse gas emission reduction, and also increasing groundwater protection. In our local food sector, we have 3 primary goals here: to increase the use of sustainable agricultural practices. So the agricultural practices that do our agricultural sites in the city, doing what we can to help increase sustainable practices, reducing food insecurity throughout the community, and preserving existing agricultural land, especially higher quality agricultural lands. In our green space and ecosystems sector, we have 4 primary goals: increasing our tree canopy, decreasing our turf, so manicured lawns, so that we can increase prairie grass or wildflower sorts of installations, so swapping that out, decreasing impervious surfaces, and increasing overall biodiversity and climate resilience of our green spaces and ecosystems. In our health and safety sector, we have 3 core goals: to reduce climate vulnerability, so that is specifically amongst our vulnerable populations, increasing infrastructure resilience, and increasing adaptive capacity. So adaptive capacity is not just the capacity for the city as a municipal entity to be able to help support adaptation and responsiveness, but also how can we help community groups, neighbors, associations, organizations within the city increase their capacity also, and network connections, etc. In our sustainable economy sector, we have 4 core goals there. The first is to develop the economic potential related to the overall sustainability plan. So a lot of these goals have opportunities for economic development. Why not capture that for the city of Fitchburg? If that economic development is going to happen somewhere, what can we do to help some of that happen in Fitchburg? And also related to that, to support equitable workforce development. So doing what we can do to partner with others to help create workforce opportunities and training opportunities for Fitchburg residents. Third, to increase local business resilience. So partnering together, sharing information, and doing what we can do to help the local economy increase its resilience to climate and other shocks. And then lastly, to prepare for and guide climate migration. We do know that climate migration has already begun. Folks moving in from parts of the country or other parts that are, for instance, flooding or having fires frequently. They're deciding to move into places that have a much less aggressive climate future. And certainly Fitchburg, although we have impacts we need to prepare for, we compare pretty good compared to other locations. So we can anticipate some migration So this is about preparing for it and seeing what we can do to make that a very positive thing for the community as opposed to having negative impacts. So successfully implementing the plan will advance those 33 sustainability goals and will achieve a cumulative reduction, so year over year increases of greenhouse gas savings. So a cumulative reduction of 358,000 metric tons by 2030. That's equal to eliminating about 7 billion cubic feet of human-made greenhouse gas atmosphere. Breaking it down by sector, you can see where those projected reductions come from. Some of them are through our business as usual reductions. So for instance, commitments that are already in place for reduction of emissions associated with electric generation are in there. Anticipated increases in just year by year fuel efficiency that the U.S. Department of Transportation anticipates, those sorts of things. But you can see then the amount that we are making up for the actions within the transportation sector, the buildings and energy sector, and waste management and water. Water, I'll say, shows up as 0, but there is actually reduction there. It's just less than 0.0%. It's about 0.08, I believe. So through implementing the plan by 2030, if we can successfully implement those goals, we'll have 62% of our existing emissions remaining, which is putting us on track for science-based goals for what we want to do to reduce and cap global warming between 1.5 and 2 degrees Celsius. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions or just participate in a discussion.
Hi, Ted. Thank you so much. Really appreciate the presentation. I just want to say quickly, I was really proud to sponsor that amendment to put the money in the budget to originally get this going. And it's really exciting to see this at this point and see an actual plan. And I really love that the actions are broken down, or so that the sector goals are broken down into actual actions with real concrete steps to move forward on this. And that's Fitchburg also has a sustainability specialist that can focus on carrying those things out. We're setting ourselves up for real success because it's a really complicated, multifaceted thing that we have to do. But I always think with sustainability, of course, I think people care about the environment more generally, but again, I think that definition at the beginning of the UN about how this is about making sure that the future is able to thrive in the same way that the current present is able to, and we need to be able to do this, and also the city finances cannot survive an unsustainable future either. So it's important in every way I can think of, and hopefully I think most people can come to an agreement that this is an important plan. So thank you so much for the detailed work on this. Questions? Nicole, to start.
I just have 2 points of, one point of feedback and a question. So starting with the question, like on one of the slides, I had a question to understand reduce climate vulnerability a little bit more. Does each of the slides come with I think I saw a little click to learn more, click something. Are these going to come with additional maybe definitions or additional kind of context?
Yes, I can say that the draft sustainability plan itself does have a fair bit of information around each of those goals, both typically trying to provide some definition as to what that means. We do then have an appendix that provides very detailed definitions for terms that may be in the plan and or other common sustainability terms. So there is some good definitions there. But each of our sector goals then does have descriptors, sometimes context data, depending on what's appropriate for that goal. But yes, the draft plan does have that.
Thank you. And then my second, maybe my piece of feedback, the iconography and the imagery in this is super beautiful, and I could see us using this a lot for communication purposes. So my only piece of feedback, the icon for transportation, the items around transportation talks about emissions, which is not from a bike, it's from a car, and our goals are reducing car emissions. So I personally would love to see that icon being changed to a car. It's like a little note. I would love people to use bikes more, but I think what we're actually talking about in this plan is from automobile transportation. So,
thank you.
I think Joe was next, and then we can do Dave next.
Sorry, I'm trying to actually get into the plan. I need to like sign into Adobe, but while I'm doing that, are the goals broken down into like kind of similar to like how you have like low hanging fruit, kind of moderately difficult stretch goals? Because I was just thinking like some of these things may be like light lifts, and then there might be some things where it would get tricky once it comes time for actual policy, just because things may, I mean, I'm thinking specifically about like transportation, right? That's something we're always going back and forth on, and we want to have increased public transportation, but then also that's a really heavy investment, and we have, you know, that'll be maybe at odds with other things that we invest in. So does the plan lay that out?
So that's not specifically in the plan right now. That's kind of part of what I was talking about. The exercise I'm going through right now with each one of these actions, identify the amount of lift, work with departments to identify what, you know, especially some of these, some of the actions in the plan already say, hey, you're doing this, keep doing it and do more of it. And so those kinds of actions are really easy to identify that this is something we can tackle right away. We're already putting, you know, X amount of effort into this. We can just expand that a bit. So a lot of that I think is going to be identified by myself and working with Chad and departments to talk through the implementation of this.
Bill, how much, two questions. How much would it cost us to contract with MG&E, you know, for, say, 5 million kilowatt, whatever our kilowatt hours, that many through the renewable program, what would be the premium? Because that theoretically would put us at
our 100% renewable.
You know, it's not, but
yeah,
theoretically, how much would that be? And then I'll have a follow-up question.
I don't have an answer for you right now. I can see if I can get one.
Out?
Yeah,
you try
I'll
to find that out. Okay. And then the second one, so on the presentation, you know, there was the cube of the greenhouse gas in the city. How much of that is absorbed by our cornfields, our trees, our grass in the 6x6 city of Fitchburg?
I should know the percentage right off the top of my head, and I can look it up because it is in our ground cover study, but it's a small percentage. So we're talking less than 10% for sure. And I can look it up. It'll take me a couple moments to do that. But
thank you.
It would be about $50,000 a year.
Okay.
So we're paying for the Green Power Tomorrow program. Now I'd have to find out if this is actually feasible through MG&E, but for the Green Power Tomorrow program, we pay a premium of 1 cent to essentially offset or to purchase renewable electricity to offset that usage that we've got. So if we applied that 1 cent per kilowatt hour to our remaining, I mean, it'd actually be less than 50,000, probably about $46,000 a year right now.
Thank you, Phil.
And Bill?
Yeah, looking at the transportation and land use, these numbers seem kind of timid to me. You know, we're talking about, we're going to bump up public transit all the way to 3.3% of all trips, and, you know, we want to increase population density by 3%. My fear is that when we have such small numbers, that's not going to spur anyone into action. They'll be like, oh, I'm just part of the 97%, you know? How do we... I think what we actually need is bold action. And how do we encourage people to take bold action if we're saying, you know, we want 3% change here, or, you know, something like that, rather than, hey, we could do 50% change. Let's shoot for at least 10, you know, something like that.
I think that those are definitely good points, and I think you are right that we definitely want to encourage and inspire action. We tend to see that you can do that through a few different ways. one way is the goal statement itself, certainly. Another way is through the kinds of communications or the programs or the actions that are implemented, certainly have an opportunity to help create encouragements, incentives, and motivation for folks to make changes. As far as the goal percentages themselves, there was definitely a lot of deliberation around that within the planning team. The one thing that I will point out is that those reductions are, to some extent, kind of going against trend. So as a community that's growing, we have been seeing increasing vehicle miles traveled. There was a downtick that happened during the pandemic that has been consistent with all of the communities, of course, that's been seen. But in general, we have seen an increase of about 7% for community-wide vehicle miles traveled between 2014 and 2022. So that 7% increase is with the dip that happened during the pandemic. So to achieve a decrease in VMT, just keep in mind that we are kind of going against the trend as an example. So that isn't to speak against, if the city wants to increase the goals, certainly I would never say no, but I just want you to understand that those decreases also are overcoming the historic increases that we've been seeing over the last decade.
Sure. It might be instructive to say, with a growing city, a 5% reduction in VMT is actually like a negative 25% per capita VMT or something along those lines.
Yeah. Jay?
Thank you.
Sorry. Did you have any follow-ups? Okay.
I have a few questions. One is, I don't know how long you've been around here, so do you know who Phil Lewis is?
I'm sorry, the name Phil Lewis is not
Phil,
connecting in my brain, but I'm horrible with names, so I'm sorry.
Phil Lewis was a landscape architect who was involved with the Dane County Parks Commission for many years, and one of the concerns that he brought up years ago that seems to have disappeared off the radar screen is cones of depression in the lower aquifer. Are you aware of that problem?
Not that term, for sure.
Well, what was starting to happen, and probably is still continuing, is that we're seeing reversal or we were back then. I don't know if things have changed now, because I haven't talked to any scientists involved with that, but we were having a problem where some of the underground springs that are in Lake Monona and Lake Mendota are reversing so that lake water is making its way to a limited, or at least it was to a limited extent, back into the lower aquifer. But there was concern that continued growth and continued water usage pumping out of that aquifer was going to exacerbate that problem. Is that something you have heard about, or anything you are able to discuss, and how we can work on that?
Well, I have heard that as a general, as a theory, but not specific to those lakes. So thank you for that information. I would say that's part of the reason why the overall issues relative to the aquifer is a core reason why having water consumption reduction, so water conservation goals, are in the plan. Here in the Midwest, especially the Great Lakes states, people tend to have a feeling that, hey, we're a water-rich region. Why do we need to reduce our water consumption? And some of the issues like you've just pointed out are examples why water conservation are really important. In addition, we can anticipate that in the coming decades, as our temperatures increase and also fluctuate, so the fluctuating temperatures and our precipitation both increases and also comes with further and further occurrences, so more time between strong rainfalls. All those issues together will exacerbate both our surface water as well as our aquifers. So it's definitely some of the driving reasons for advancing water conservation.
All right. And then I want to switch to something completely different. There is a section in here on farmland, and I think we are all aware that there are virtually no farms in Fitchburg that are producing food for human consumption. Almost all of the agriculture production in Fitchburg is going toward animal feed, which in and of itself is a pretty unsustainable way of feeding people. So, but I didn't see much discussion in the plan about how we might encourage farmers to go in a different direction. Are there any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so that's a good point. I'll first back up and say that part of the reason why we address ag land in Fitchburg is just, globally speaking, food security is a consideration or a concern in the mid and long term. And certainly in the United States, there have been a number of very robust studies that indicate we should be anticipating crop yields to be dropping as we move into the middle of the century. So in general, we definitely encourage communities that have ag, let's think about what we can do to protect that land, because there will probably come a time where we wish that we had some of the ag land that we've let go. So some of the actions in the plan are certainly around what can we do to help farmers be successful? What can we help to build resilience for those properties and practices? And what can we do to help encourage moving into sustainable practices, regenerative agriculture, et cetera? And so when we start talking about regenerative agriculture practices, it may not necessarily, you can do regenerative agriculture practices that still happen to be producing grain that might be sent to, animal feed, but high quality regenerative agriculture practices are going to tend to also include, animals themselves, crop rotations. You start getting into diversity of what you're growing. So those should help provide some encouragement or illustrations on how farmers could integrate other food production into the crops that they are growing, and hopefully some that can be local, which does relate to one of the other goals in that sector, which is to increase local food production, which can be both in significant agriculture practices as well as backyard agriculture, urban agriculture, community gardening, etc. However, and I think we do have some communications around illustrating the importance of organic practices and the like. So I think usually in those kinds of communication pieces, there can be identification of why other crops might be of value. Why, rather than growing grain for animals, might there be a path for a practitioner to transition some or all of their growth to food that can be directly supplied to local people. So looking at those goals in conjunction, you can definitely create some influence or help support that through some of the actions like the communication campaign and education campaigns.
I'll just add a little bit, as Ted mentioned, part of that increasing local food production is things like backyard gardening, community gardening. One of the things I really like about this plan that Pale Blue Dot puts together, one of the things that's gotten, I think, some of the most positive feedback overall is when you go through the plan, at the end of each section, there is a what you can do page. And so a lot of this plan is targeted at the municipality. It's targeted at staff, at our partners, at council. Those what you can do pages, that's something that anyone can look at that and say, all right, here are things that I can apply to my own life. There are links to resources where you can learn more about it. So it really is a very, it's an engaging plan for more than just the staff tasked with implementing this, that there is a lot for public engagement and education as well.
Yeah, and the online version of that has nice relevant links that you can go to, which is nice.
And so there's a lot of information about, the organics and composting, about reducing waste, about backyard gardening and backyard poultry keeping, things like that.
Well, in the agriculture section, you briefly referenced food deserts, which are a real problem in Fitchburg. We have several neighborhoods where the nearest place to buy any kind of food is over a mile away, sometimes 2 or 3 miles away. And I'm not just talking about the rural areas. We have people living in very urban sections of Fitchburg that don't really have access to fresh food other than, maybe a fast food restaurant, which is not what we're talking about as a good alternative. So I think something that should be emphasized in here is adjusting our planning, our development practices and planning practices to encourage those types of retail places for people to buy something. And we have it doesn't have to be a 70,000 square foot grocery store. There are a lot of options for how we can meet some of those needs, but in some ways I felt we've been going backwards on that. We had a long time grocery store. It was probably there for 40 years up on Fish Hatchery Road, and it closed 20 some years ago. And we haven't been able to replace that in that neighborhood in a meaningful way.
There is a market there.
Not up on Fish Hatchery Road.
Yeah, there are two small supermarkets, Latino supermarket. I shop there.
Yeah, but it's just we just don't have those kind of resources. So this is something that that I think we need to encourage in a stronger way. So I would like to see something put into the plan that says that Fitchburg's going to encourage eliminating the food deserts by not just our planning practices, but also whatever we can do in terms of economic development funding.
Yeah, it's a very good point, Jay. We're running a little bit low on time, so I'd be happy to have you guys respond, but just want to make sure we can warp speed.
That's a great suggestion, and we'll definitely look into that. And I also wanted to share that I did look up the answer to the question about carbon sequestration. Carbon sequestration is estimated because you'd really, to get a fine number, you'd have to look at species of trees and size and age and all that sort of thing. But using USDA Forest Service average sequestration numbers for trees and other academic studies for average for lawns and other green, grasses and such, carbon sequestration community-wide is about 20.5 thousand metric tons a year. So it's about 5% of community-wide emissions.
Just to kind of respond to that, and I'll try to make it quick, but to be comprehensive, there's a lot that Fitchburg has been doing without a sustainability plan. We've installed 460 kilowatts of solar on our rooftops. We've done a lot to reduce water use and to make sure that we're being more responsible with the water that we do have. We do leaf-free streets and other, salt-wise. There's a lot of stuff that has been going on, and the whole motivation for this was, let's actually put some guidance to it. Let's put some metrics and benchmarks in place. Let's make sure that we actually can track where we're going, and we're not just doing kind of these one-off projects all the time. This is meant to be comprehensive, but sustainability is so broad, it could touch on twice as many topics as we're added in here. So if there are things that we missed that should be included, we want to make sure we get to that. But this is also not a be-all, end-all. This is not the final document, and nothing, if something isn't in here, that means we're not going to touch it. So absolutely it will be the case that 3 months from now, a year from now, we're going to say, oh gosh, we didn't put this in the sustainability plan. Great, let's do it anyway. That's gonna come up, I have no doubt. So we wanted this to be as comprehensive, as far-reaching as possible, because we want anything that should be important to Fitchburg, we want it to be in here so that we're aware of it and we can prioritize it. But we're always happy to add more as long as we've got capacity and we recognize that it's worthwhile.
Thanks, Phil.
And I'll just add on to that also, just to say that in our implementation section, we reinforce that, and we also encourage us to think of this as a living document, which means let's review implementation on a regular basis. Based on the implementation and that review, what have we learned? Actions that are working well for us, let's advance that. Something didn't work like we thought it would. New technology comes out, a new issue is raised. Feel feel comfortable that as a living document, you can modify as you go along. You can tweak those actions. So just to reinforce what Phil is saying.
Great. And just to wrap it up, the draft sustainability plan is on the website. If you search, and how I always do it is I always Google Fitchburg sustainability plan, and the first hit is the Fitchburg sustainability plan, and you can get the link to the draft website. There is a survey for feedback. Is that correct? How long is that?
That's open through Friday, so August 30th. Is that correct, or end of Thursday or end of Friday?
It says through August 30th.
So that's Friday. Yep. So starting over the weekend, Ted will pull that down so that we can start actually compiling all the commentary and look at what does need to be, what needs to be changed, and to what degree before we bring a final plan to council for referral.
Fantastic. So if all the council wants to take a look and add anything else that they haven't had a chance to say here, and if our public wants to make sure they get on that sustainability plan draft by August 30th and fill it out. Thank you all so much. Appreciate that, and we really look forward to having this discussion again in the fall, hopefully when we look at implementation, or we look at adoption of the plan. Thank you.
All right. Thanks. Thanks, Ted.
Thank you very much.
Have a good night, Ted. Thank you. We're going to move on to our next item, which is agenda item 6B, EMS update and discussion. And I believe we're going to have our administrator, Chad Brecklin, and our mayor, I believe.
Yeah, I can. Mine is an intro.
Do you want to kick it off, or do you want to, Chad? Do you want to kick it off, or should the mayor? Mayor, please go. Great. Yeah, please go ahead.
Okay, so
while Chad is setting up, the mayor is going to give an introduction to what we're talking about
yeah,
today.
So the question is why we are presenting this topic to you tonight. So I'm going to give you a brief summary, and then Chad is going to do the presentation and discuss what are the short and long-term solutions. So, as you know, the city of Fitchburg has been operating its EMS services through a district for more than 40 years, since 1977. So when this district was established, all the three partners were small communities, and this district model was a great option. This agreement, which is over 40 years old, is formed by three communities, the city of Fitchburg, the city of Verona, and the town of Verona. And each of them have the same percentage of participation and vote. It's formed by a commission of 9 members, and each municipality has 3 members that represent in the district. So how the calculation and the budget that each municipality participate in the district is calculated based on a percentage of the equalized value. Chad is going to explain in detail that. But I want to mention that this district performs excellent services. There are no complaints about the leadership, the services, but the city of Verona lately approached me a couple of months ago, and they are looking at the calculation of the formula, if we need to revise the participation of each municipality. So for many years, as you know, the city of Fitchburg call for services have increased significantly for many reasons. We acquired the town of Madison. We have a great location and people are moving to this area. And in the last 10 years, as we know, the city has grown almost 34% in population. So all of these are affecting, our calls for services. For the year 22, 23, and 24, the calls in the city of Fitchburg reflected 66% of the total call from the district. Year to date, as June of this year, it's about 67% of runs by Fitchburg, 26% by Verona, and 2% by the town of Verona. So Fitchburg allocation of the district budget is based on the equalized value. For 2024 was around 56.2%, and the projected for 2025 is going to be almost the same. So you can see there is as I call the Fitchburg gap, between the calls in services and our participation in the budget. So in 2024, the allocation for the district for our part was almost $1.1 million. And if we use the same formula for 2025, it's projected the allocation to increase to $1.2 million. So at the beginning of the year, as I mentioned, the mayor of Verona approached me to discuss the agreement formula and the future of the EMS district. We have had several meetings with our city administrator, our fire chief, and the EMS chief. So as I mentioned before, the city of Verona is looking to revise our formula. But I also want to mention that the city of Verona has been a great partner working with us for many, many years. And they, I don't want to use the word subsidizing, but I say they have been funding a little bit our Fitchburg gap. So we knew for many years that this discussion will happen, that the town will come and the city will come and say, hey, Fitchburg, I think your location, your participation in the district should be according to your runs, how many calls you have. So we knew that this conversation will happen eventually, and it's happening now in 2024. So if the formula needs to be changed and our funding to the district will increase considerably, we as a city need to have this discussion, and we need to ask your feedback on how to proceed and how to revise the agreement and how this new agreement should look like. I firmly believe that if we are going to fund 2/3 of the district, the city of Fitchburg should have a more leadership role in the district. So Chad is going to do the presentation, and he has a lot of information, what we have been discussing in the last couple of months, how this new formula will look like. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor, for the opening comments and background. Much appreciated. And I also want to echo what Mayor Arata-Frada had to say about the Fitrona Emergency Medical Service that we do have serving our community. It is a very professional, well-trained, competent, and responsive service, and that's a testament to Chief Patrick Anderson's leadership. He is in the room, as is our Fire Chief, Chad Grossen. And I'll work through a number of items on this presentation this evening. I will talk about the intergovernmental agreement, often referred to as the IGA, provide an overview and budget considerations. We could look at potential adjustments to the IGA. We can also take a look at what long-term emergency medical service or EMS options may be. I'm happy to offer a recommendation for conversation with some potential timelines, and then, of course, discussion and ideally some direction from council. So as the mayor mentioned, the original IGA was formed between the city of Verona, the city of Fitchburg, and the town of Verona in 1977. The most recent update was in 2021, and you can see here within a screenshot of the existing IGA what the intent of the intergovernmental agreement was, obviously to create emergency medical services district that would serve those 3 municipalities, and the district would be named Fitrona EMS District. The EMS district is managed and overseen by a commission. That commission consists of 9 members, with 3 members from each of the 3 participating communities being representatives. It's my recollection that of those 3 members from each community, 1 of them is an elected official, which would equate to 3 elected officials on that commission and 6 appointed officials. The funding formula, as Mayor Arata-Frada had mentioned, I have highlighted here, is currently based on 1 factor, and that is total equalized valuation by the municipalities. That is, again, the sole factor of the funding formula, which is also creating the challenges related to an equitable funding arrangement. When looking at the share of the EMS operating budget, the mayor covered a few of these statistics, but I certainly want to point out that the document that I'm showing here, or table that I'm showing here in front of you, includes the full use of the special levy limit adjustment for the 2025 budget. That's the one that we've been utilizing the last 2 years as the consumer price index has continued to trend high. We anticipate utilizing that levy limit adjustment again for the 2025 budget. So you can see, as we look at the 2025 budget, the breakdown of cost is approximately 56% for the city of Fitchburg, 39% for the city of Verona, and 5% for the town of Verona. Again, as previously discussed, if you look at calls for service by municipality, just utilizing the most recent monthly report that was submitted, the city of Fitchburg, year to date, has approximately 67% of the calls for service. The city of Verona, 26% of the calls for service, and the town of Verona, 2% of the calls for service. That is relatively consistent over the last several years. Here's a table that just kind of allows a direct comparison when we talk about the percentage of funding by municipality as well as their corresponding percentage of the calls for service. So again, this just really summarizes some of the information that has already been conveyed through the presentation. When we look at potential intergovernmental agreement adjustments, the city of Verona, as has been mentioned, has requested an update to the IGA funding formula to better reflect the call for service volume. As is mentioned, here you can see the percentages of the budget and the percentages of the calls for service. Again, in a conversation with the town of Verona, they're open to having a discussion on an update to the IGA. They are steadfast in wanting to remain a partner in the district, and they would not want the EMS service that they're currently receiving in the town to be negatively impacted by an update to the IGA. And again, you can see the percentages that they currently are experiencing in the town of Verona. From the city of Fitchburg perspective, the mayor and staff are open to discussing an update to the IGA, pending obviously direction from the Common Council. Staff recommends that any update to the IGA include a corresponding change in commission membership to reflect the district funding percentage paid, i.e., as the mayor had mentioned, if the city of Fitchburg is funding 66% or 2/3 of the funds to operate the district, we would hope that the membership is comprised of 2/3 of Fitchburg representatives. There may be other components of the IGA that could or should be updated should the council wish to update the agreement. That will be an opportunity to take a look at the agreement and determine what other components might be appropriate to have updated. And again, looking at the percentages of Fitchburg here that we've discussed, and updating the IGA could be a short-term option as we look at what potential long-term options may be later in this presentation. So when we look at the funding formula for shared fire and/or EMS districts, there are a number of other options that might be available for funding formula factors. For the purposes of our presentation, discussion, and illustration this evening, we've elected to use 3 factors, utilizing a 3-year average of those particular factors. Those factors are equalized value with the TID value in, population, and call for service volume. When utilizing these 3 factors and a 3-year average of 2021 to 2023 and an equal weight of those 3 factors at 1/3 apiece, you can see where the funding allocation would now align when utilizing those 3 factors averaged over 3 years. The city of Fitchburg would pay approximately 63% of the overall cost of the district, the city of Verona approximately 33% of the cost, and the town of Verona approximately 4% of the cost. Based on the 2024 budget, the estimated cost increase with a funding formula illustration utilized would be approximately $200,000. It's rough math at this point in time. I would consider it to be a preliminary estimate, but we do feel that that's probably relatively fair. As I mentioned earlier, the update to the IGA could be considered a short-term option. There are long-term EMS options that are available to the city as well. As the mayor mentioned, when the city of Verona initially approached her to discuss an update to the IGA, they also did mention an openness to discussing long-term options for EMS service provision in the city of Verona. In fact, they did have a discussion at a July Common Council meeting on this topic, where a bit of information was presented, and ultimately the outcome of that discussion was the council in the city of Verona certainly wanted to see the feasibility of updating the IGA and appeared to be open to other options, but I think there were a number of questions that remain to be answered coming out of that discussion related to the long-term options. And then, of course, we have a current fire chief vacancy in the city. As we do with any position vacancy, we always take a moment to assess what that vacancy is, if there are any changes necessary in the roles and responsibilities, or in certain situations, if that position could be better utilized in another way within the city. Obviously, in the case of a fire chief, I wouldn't recommend utilizing that position in any other way. But it also gave us an opportunity to pause in light of the conversation that Verona brought forward. So that's why the background as to why we're having a conversation related to long-term options in addition to a potential update to the IGA. For anyone, I know a number of you have been in the community a number of years and involved in the Common Council as well. This discussion on long-term EMS service delivery seems to be either discussed or studied every 4 or 5 years. To me, and this is just me speaking, that seems to be an indication of ongoing concerns or at least questions about the current model's long-term viability as the communities that it serves continue to grow rapidly. And I think it also creates a measure of uncertainty for Fitch-Verona EMS and Verona and Fitchburg Fire Department members when they continue to have to experience these conversations and or studies every 4 to 5 years. There are a few long-term options that could be considered by the city of Fitchburg specifically. We could simply maintain the existing EMS service through Fitch-Verona's EMS district. I do believe and would recommend that if this is the approach selected, that an updated IGA is necessary and appropriate to continue this model both in the short term and the long term. The secondary option could be a combined fire and EMS district with interested parties. And a third option could be city-based emergency medical service that operated within the Fitchburg Fire Department. I'll work through each of the three options and indicate what some of the attributes of those particular options may be. I don't want to necessarily associate them with either a pro or a con. I thought that would be too subjective, and I wanted to remain objective for you as council members to determine whether or not these attributes are a pro or a con from your particular perspective. But when looking at the attributes of the existing EMS district with the assumption of an updated IGA, it is a long-established EMS district since 1977. The service, as we've noted, is professional, competent, and reliable, and this service actually could be less expensive, at least in the short term, than other options. The funding formula would be more equitable after an IGA update. The governance structure or EMS commission membership and representation relative to the funding paid would also be addressed through an IGA update. And there are levy limit benefits offered by state statute for fire and or EMS districts. There are some possible inefficiencies and or inconsistencies that exist. The contract and employment personnel policies as it relates to EMS service and fire service. Funding and budgeting processes. One of those from a funding and budgeting process is the aforementioned levy limit favorability that is extended to districts. Those same favorabilities are not necessarily extended to municipalities operating fire and EMS services. The ongoing need to expand 1 EMS and 2 fire departments, aka 3 organizations within 2 communities. Again, the commission membership or governance structure lacks direct voter accountability. Commission membership is not reflective of the amount of funding paid to operate the district, and the lack of dedicated human resources, finance, and administrative staff for a growing department of over 20 full-time employees and a budget of over $2 million. If we look at option number 2, which could be the creation of a joint fire and EMS district, the size of that district and the diversity of the assignments available may enhance recruitment and retention efforts. Efficiencies related to command staff roles, officer in charge or OIC coverage, equipment and capital purchases could be possible. Consistencies through elimination of differences between contract and employment and personnel policies could be adjusted. Obviously, the creation of a new district would provide the opportunity to have an equitable funding formula. The governance or commission structure and representation would be relative to the funding paid after the IGA update or creation. The residents of the respective participating municipalities could potentially view the cooperative district favorably. There are, as mentioned, levy limit benefits to combined fire and EMS districts. And while the guidance and direction has not yet been released by the state of Wisconsin in regards to the Innovation Fund, this could potentially qualify for a project related to that funding that is a temporary funding on a 3-year basis. Some other attributes of creating a fire and EMS district would be obviously navigating the dissolution and withdrawal from the existing district. Some considerations that would have to be addressed, among others, this is just a high-level overview, would be integration of employees. I know that in any conversations the mayor of Verona and Mayor Arata-Frada have had, as they've been steadfast in indicating that existing employees within the Fitch-Verona EMS district have job security. They would want to be, we would want them to be integrated into the solution that was potentially implemented if there is a change. Determination of the roles. What roles do particular people fill? We currently have, a number of folks in chief-related roles and titles, and, how do we figure out where they all fit into the mix? Employment policies, equipment and vehicles, those sorts of considerations would have to be navigated. If we also look at creating a fire and EMS district, clearly an intergovernmental agreement would have to be negotiated and created. The commissions and governance structure, staffing, training, billing, and insurance, again, all, equipment and vehicles, all kinds of other considerations, again, that would have to be addressed. Some of which could be navigated through the dissolution or withdrawal of the district potentially. I don't think anybody would ideally be looking to just sell off the equipment that might be in the existing district if that district was not going to exist any longer. Ideally, the folks who had been participating in that district would have access to that equipment in some way, shape, or form. I do think it would be appropriate if a new district was created, and really continuing if with the growth of Fitrona EMS, that at some point in time, there's either staffing and or a requirement by the district that would contract with one or more of the participating municipalities to provide human resources, finance, administrative, and other services. Again, as the current district stands, their command staff is tasked with wearing a lot of different hats because they oftentimes don't have that support that they may need. I know that both the city of Fitchburg and the city of Verona are more than willing and happy to assist and answer questions and provide guidance where we can. But at some point, there will be a tipping point where dedicated staff may be necessary. Yeah, sure.
Question on that. Back when I was on the EMS commission, which goes back to the mid-90s and early 2000s, the district had a chief. There were 2 deputy chiefs. We had a number of paramedics. Well, we switched to a paramedic service at that time. But we had a finance director in the office. Does the EMS not have a finance director anymore?
I don't know the specific title. Perhaps Chief Anderson is willing to answer that question on my behalf. And I'm not certain. I believe it may be a part-time position at this point in time. But again, it's best for Chief Anderson to answer that question because I could just be butchering it.
Sure. You're correct. So there was a full-time office manager at the time, Janie. That when she was the full-time office manager at the time, we did ambulance billing internally. So part of her job was actually to do that.
Right.
I don't know exactly what year that was when we started using, essentially the volume went up. We now use a third-party biller. So we now have a part-time office manager who helps more with accounts receivable and payroll stuff. So it is, as far as administrative staff, it's a full-time chief, chief, 2 full-time deputy chiefs, and a part-time office manager.
I see. That may not have been the wisest move to make, but you weren't here for it, so all right. I just wanted to clarify because I kept seeing finance up there, and I'm like, but we had that position, so we lost it somewhere along the way.
Although, was the ambulance billing ambulance billing is also part of medical billing, right?
Right.
Medical billing's a nightmare. I think it's actually really smart that you outsourced the medical billing personally. I deal with medical billing a lot in my day job, and it's the number one make or break things for healthcare systems. So while we did lose a lot of really good benefits, I think it was actually kind of smart that you outsourced that.
Correct. And I really don't think it's probably appropriate to call Janie's role a finance director like a Misty equivalent.
Well, no, it was that job, though. I mean,
she was truly office managery type stuff.
But she did the billing. She was a whiz at it.
Sure. Back when we were, at 800 calls a year.
Well, no, at one point we were.
Let's move on. We don't have to debate.
I think
Janie's
when I left,
role.
we were doing 1,300.
Chad, please continue. Thanks.
Thank you. One of the attributes of creating a new fire and EMS district is it's possible that the participating municipalities may pay more than they currently do for existing service. Some of that could be tied to these other administrative support functions that may be required depending upon the size of the district. Until a particular option, if selected, is further vetted, we certainly wouldn't know the full impact there financially. And then the creation of a statutorily required fire commission would need to be done in the case of a joint fire and EMS district. They would assume the fire-related role of the participating community's existing police and fire commissions for those that are statutorily required to have one, like the city of Fitchburg. The third option for consideration is city-based fire and EMS. Again, one of the benefits or attributes, shall I say, would be the size of the district and diversity of assignment. Again, may be an attractive enhancement to recruitment and retention efforts. Again, there's a possibility of creating efficiencies related to command staff roles, OIC coverage, equipment and capital purchases. Again, consistent contract and employment personnel policies. A lot of those first 3 points are very similar, clearly, to the creation of a joint fire and EMS district. The municipality, in this case, we're talking about the city of Fitchburg, would have complete control of the funding and governance of the service. Funding and operations could be more directly accountable to voters in this scenario. And then, of course, in this case, Fitchburg's human resources, finance, and administrative staff already exist and can support a city-based service. A city-based service does not have the same levy limit benefits that are provided to fire and EMS districts.
That's come up like 4 or 5 times. Can you clarify what exactly that means?
So I will talk about what I know, and I will ask Misty to provide a better detailed answer on that, Alder Allen, because I may know just enough to be dangerous. So basically, as I understand it, state statute, as it relates to levy limits, provides those municipalities who utilize a fire and or EMS district for those services that increases of certain levels are exempt from the levy limit calculation, i.e. it allows us to increase our levy limit funding higher than what would be allowed via the net new construction. That's how I understand it. I will not say that that is a confident explanation, and again, I will ask Misty to follow up with the entire council on the more detailed explanation.
Well, so a more specific question would be, if we had a joint fire EMS district with the city of Verona and town of Verona, we might not need to include the 6 additional firefighter or the 6 additional fire staff in the referendum that we're going to be asking for?
I would not say that at this point in time, because those 6 firefighter positions are sorely needed to address current staffing.
Right.
Within the fire department, and any change in the existing arrangement, I would see as being at least a couple of years, 2 to 3 years minimally away.
I understand that. I'm just saying, if we had that arrangement now, if we had a joint fire EMS district now,
sure,
would we not have to ask for those in a referendum?
You may not need to, because what you could have done was utilize the levy limit exemption that's afforded under state statute. So for a real world example, during the 2024 budget process, there was a request from Fitchburg to add a second deputy chief position. And because of the levy limit benefits afforded by the statutes, while it still is levied money, it does allow us to exceed the levy limits that are afforded to us by the net new construction. So hopefully I've at least kind of answered your question, and I will again ask Misty to follow up with that. Until this would be fully vetted, it's quite possible and more than likely in this particular scenario that the city of Fitchburg would pay more than it currently does for existing services. There are a few different factors that might play into that. And I guess I could skip to my bottom bullet point while I'm on this particular topic and then work through the second to the third bullet point next. But in looking at the 2024 budget, preliminarily, the cost estimate to city-based fire and EMS is approximately $500,000 more each year than it is under the existing cost of service. Now, that is using the current terms of the IGA, not a potential updated terms of the IGA, and that is also not factoring in the increase that we will be anticipating for the 2025 budget. So if you look at both of those items, if the budget is passed in November, I think we're looking at, right around $100,000 increase in what we're currently paying with the numbers that were utilized to come up with this preliminary estimate. And then through a potential funding formula adjustment, that would be an additional approximately $200,000. So we might possibly already be paying about half of this difference in the next couple of years. And then, of course, the other contributing factors to where this difference is coming from is, and why it's higher is right now the current EMS district does not have those administrative support functions currently. And as that district grows, if it continues to be providing EMS service, is likely to add those services at some point in time. When that is, I have no idea, but that's probably also what's contributing to some of the price discrepancy there, or cost discrepancy. And then, of course, much like with a joint fire and EMS district, again, there's that whole navigating the dissolution and withdrawal from the existing district. So if I look at recommendations for the Common Council to consider, I do believe that it would be appropriate to determine with our district partners, the City of Verona and the Town of Verona, if an updated IGA is achievable, and look to bring that back to Common Council for consideration and action. I also think that we are at a time based upon the city's where we stand with growth and population. We just eclipsed 35,000. If the referendum passes, we'll have over 20 full-time employees in our fire department. That this might be an appropriate time to explore the creation of city-based fire and EMS department as a long-term option. As I mentioned throughout the presentation here at various points, Fitchburg is going to be paying more. That's inevitable, and it's probably only right. I think the mayor did a great job of summarizing that issue during her opening remarks. And we want to be good partners there. There's no doubt about that. So we're going to need to pay more just to be a good partner. With that in mind, we're looking at approximately 63% of the funding likely to be coming from the city of Fitchburg, which at that point in time might be the tipping point that says, in lieu of being 2/3 of the vote in a commission, should we just be our own vote, so to speak, on our own city-led fire and EMS service. Again, just to reaffirm some of the operational efficiencies that could be possible through city-based service, clarification of command staff roles, OIC coverage enhancement, equipment and capital purchases, contract and employment processes and policies, funding, budgeting, and staffing consistencies, growing one department within our municipality in lieu of 3 departments that we're currently discussing. I know we don't have direct influence over the City of Verona's fire department, but obviously it factors into the entire conversation about the growing of multiple departments. And then again, HR, finance, administrative support exists within the city today. Other considerations, we've kind of touched on some of these as well. If the existing service model continues, growth in Verona, Fitchburg, and the town of Verona will require corresponding growth of Verona EMS, the Verona Fire Department, and the Fitchburg Fire Department. Again, that whole indication that 3 departments are going to need to continue to grow to meet the population increase and call for service demands. There will be a threshold that Verona EMS reaches where those dedicated support services are going to be necessary, which will increase the cost to fund the district over and above the cost of the additional paramedic staff that would be needed for the population growth of the 3 municipalities that are currently participating. And at this point in time, this is not relative to the city of Fitchburg, city of Verona, and town of Verona, and the Verona EMS district as a whole. But over the years, as I've paid some attention to what's happened in other combined joint fire and EMS districts, there generally appears to be an issue or incident that eventually arises that displeases one or more of the participating partners and has the potential to negatively impact partner relationships moving forward. We've seen a couple of these things pop up now with the levy limit considerations now, where you may have 5, 6, 7 municipalities that are participating in a joint district, and the need for a referendum now comes up, and the challenges that can be associated with having a referendum in multiple municipalities, and the education and outreach, and ideally trying to gather consensus from that number of participating parties. And then again, referencing that a discussion on long-term EMS seems to occur with regularity every 4 to 5 years. Perhaps now is an appropriate time to commit to a long-term delivery model, whatever that is. I mean, maybe it's the first option that's presented, maybe it's the second, maybe it's the third. But I do think some level of commitment in the long term will at least reduce the uncertainty that continues to occur every 5 years or so. When looking at a timeline, I think we're all well aware that the 2025 operating budget process is rather far along in the process, and it would be difficult to achieve an updated IGA within the time frame for a 2025 budget implementation. So I would recommend that if we're able to achieve that update, that we look to implement those changes for the fiscal year that would begin January 1st of 2026. Again, that would afford some time for the district partners to have thoughtful and constructive discussion. Then I would recommend utilizing the remainder of 2024 and early 2025 to explore city-based fire and EMS service feasibility, bring more information back to the Common Council for better decision-making. Obviously, you don't have a full picture in front of you right now. We're not that far along in the process because we need direction from the Common Council to determine what, if anything, you would like staff to begin doing related to EMS service. So if we can utilize that time to assess the decision related to long-term EMS deliberately and from multiple perspectives, and the determination is made that the service is feasible running from city base, we would identify the date that service could potentially begin. Thank you for your patience as I work through those slides, discussion and direction.
Nicole?
I think Dave was slightly first.
Oh,
I'll
thank
go
you,
after
Dave.
you, Dave.
As a statement, I'm for whatever will bring services to our residents at the lowest possible price. Question for you, Mayor. We were talking about the Innovation Fund. Have you talked to Oregon? We share a school district with Verona and Oregon. Have we talked to them? That seems to make sense to me. And the Innovation Fund would look far more favorably on a three city district.
No, we haven't talked to Oregon because we are trying to resolve the funding calculation with Verona first. The city of Verona and the chief of fire, they really wants to also have city-led EMS and fire. This is the sense that I got from multiple meeting with them, is that I don't think that the first option for them is to have create a new district. So this is what I can tell you for my perception and the discussion that we had, is I don't think that they are open to create an EMS and fire district. They will prefer to go with the first option, to city-led.
Nicole?
I appreciate that question, because when thinking about like our south kind of border and what borders with Oregon, that was a similar question. I appreciate you laying these out, and I was excited to know that I fell in the same place that your recommendation was. Like the second option, although it's a great thought, I don't think further enmeshment really works with the growth of our city, but all those pros of kind of synergies, to use an overused term, really lend themselves to that city-led piece. So I really appreciate that. I have two questions. The first one is, the updating the IGA in 2026, like if we did that for, say, a couple more years before we're able to do a city-led piece, is Mayor Diaz bought into that? Maybe that's more of a question for you.
No, I think we are still discussing. We haven't finalized anything yet because
Okay.
this is what we are talking to our councils. Particularly, this is something that I share with the mayor of Verona, is that I think we should follow like what we did with the town of Madison, the solution, that we have a plan in place. We can do a short-term goal is to change the agreement in maybe for 1 or 2 years, and then they say, okay, in 3 years, the district is going to dissolve. Every municipality is going to have a city-led, 3 or 4 years, whatever it is, I don't know. But we have a plan like we did with the town of Madison. We work toward that plan, so each municipality is working toward that goal, and we need to determine how to, dissolve the district, personnel, all of that. It's going to take time.
Yeah.
So that one could be an option that I would feel comfortable following, to have a plan, not to say, okay, we're going to do it right now.
Yeah.
And, I think we need to have a plan and do it gradually.
I agree, and I think it makes us better neighbors to do it that way. Okay, that makes sense. And then I think my second question was for the two awesome dudes in white behind you. I guess, has this recommendation been consolidated with you gentlemen? Like, are you kind of on the same page? I don't know if that's an appropriate thing to ask, but like, I would love to understand, maybe that's a follow-up that comes in like the city-led approach of like, I have many, many opinions, but I'm not a fire chief or an EMS chief. So I would love to understand if this kind of represents that group, or if that's what we're going to go and discuss as a team, if that's the result.
So I think it still clearly requires more conversation. I've engaged in conversation with both Chief Anderson and Chief Grossen on this topic, and I won't speak for their respective opinions on where they might fall in the recommendation. I'll allow them to do that, or suggest that they do that if they want, either at this meeting or in individual conversations or future meetings with the Common Council. But I do think whatever direction we ultimately look to go long-term, they're both valuable contributors to the conversations and the perspectives. I mean, clearly, Chief Grossen and his team are going to be able to answer and provide information from that fire department perspective and what their capabilities and so forth are. And Chief Anderson is going to be able to provide that very same perspective from the EMS perspective. Those are well-related services within public safety. There is some distinction between them, clearly, and the skill sets are different. And I think we would want to get, I know we would want to get that perspective in there to make the best decision possible.
Jay?
Yeah, the idea of including Oregon is probably not feasible in even the slightest degree. Oregon's fire and EMS service is 20 years behind where we are. I mean, it's such a small area that they just haven't had the resources. There's still an EMTI. They might be EMTB. Are they EMTB? Oh, they did. Okay, so they have paramedics now, but they don't have anything even close to the staffing, and it's just it's just not where it would cost them. It would cost them an enormous amount of money just to catch up. So I think that's not a feasible solution. It's funny because as we talk about this equalized valuation, that always worked out to be about the same as the calls for service for many, 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 many years. And the reason it's not anymore is because of Epic. Epic has increased the total tax base in Verona so much, while the population of Verona hasn't increased at a rate anything even close to ours. So that's why there's this disparity that's arisen over the last 8 or 10 years. So I mean, I would be okay with a city-led department. I wasn't okay with it the last time I went through this exercise because it didn't make any sense and it was just going to cost a fortune. But I think I prefer having a joint fire EMS district. To me, that provides more resources. It provides I don't even know what this levy limit thing is going to be until Misty's explanation to us comes. But I think that provides us more flexibility. It provides more resources, and it gives us. I think it gives us more flexibility moving forward than having our own independent district, our own independent department. But either and plus, I think having our own independent department is going to cost more. It's going to cost Verona more. It's going to cost everybody more. It's just a matter of how the costs get split up. So, how many? Can you tell me how many paramedics we currently have on staff? How many authorized staff we have? I heard the number 20, but I presume that includes you.
No, so it's 21 medics totally. It takes 7 medics to staff one station for 24/7. So there's 21 full-time medics, 2 deputy chief positions, a full-time chief position, that part-time office manager, and then about 15 part-time paramedics that fill in all of those hours for 21 full-timers.
So I presume, and I know this is way early in the conversation, but I presume that if we went with a city-only department, that then we would inherit 14 of those positions? Because we'd still have to staff 2 ambulances, right?
To staff 2 ambulances, you would need 14 full-time paramedics.
And we would probably need some part-timers to deal with vacation days and whatnot.
Correct.
So, all right. So, that there's not going to be any staff saving cost. Maybe we get rid of the chief, but you're still going to need a body to supervise the paramedics. And even if we cross-trained all of the fire and EMS personnel, you still need somebody. You're still going to need a command staff in that role. So maybe it's a few $1,000s a year less as a deputy position. But I still think it's not going to approach any kind of meaningful cost savings, which was the big selling point the last time I went through this exercise in 2009. When all the numbers were run, it turns out it wasn't going to save anything. And I don't think it will, even if we had 2 city-led departments. It's certainly not going to save Verona any money. So the town is kind of just going along for the ride. They're like, we just want to have some service. And I don't know. I would, if it were up to me to push for something, I would be pushing for the combined fire EMS district, because I think that gives us the best long-term position.
Any other thoughts from the council? Bill?
Yeah, so Chad, you had, in your slide deck, you had said that the 3-entity joint fire and EMS may cost the municipalities more. And I thought that was a little weird because I figured economies of scale would come into play and everybody should be paying a little bit less. Could you explain why that might be more?
Yeah, I think in that model, obviously you would have a much larger district because you'd be combining the 25-ish or so employees of the existing, I guess I should say potentially combining. I mean, I don't know who all would want to be partners, but if hypothetically speaking, we're talking about the 3 existing partners, there's a EMS department that has approximately 25 people in it. There's a fire department in Fitchburg that has approximately 20 people in it, and a fire department in Verona that I believe has, about a dozen, maybe 15. I don't know exactly what the numbers are there. So you're basically going to be doubling the size of your department, which then is probably going to be that threshold that is going to say there needs to be either staff people or support services contracted with municipalities that are going to, for those HR, finance, administrative services, which is likely going to drive that cost up higher than what it currently is under the existing model. That's the belief. Again, we'd have to obviously work numbers and to get a better idea of what that impact may be. But unlike the 2009, I think I was pretty clear in all of my slides that there's not a lower cost option out there. Of the three, all three of them are probably going to cost us more in the long run. So I'm not here to try to sell a bill of goods that, we're going to save a bunch of money here and you guys should authorize staff to proceed. And then I come back with oh, by the way, we're not going to save any and you should still proceed. So I'm here to be as open and frank with the numbers as possible based on what we know today.
My worry about combining the fire and EMS into one district, it seems like it's sort of a medium-term solution, because if Fitchburg continues to grow and we hit 60,000 people at some point, at that point, I don't think it makes any sense for us to have a shared EMS district. Like at that point, I think it would make sense for us to have our own. So then we're just doing like another complicated thing.
Because we have more control of what we have control of the funding. We have control of the, managing the department.
That's the thing about the EMS district has always been interesting for me going through the budget process, because it's a piece of the budget that I don't know, we just don't have as much say in. No. Like I don't really think that much about like how I can influence the budget, because I just don't, it's not controlled really fully by us. The fire department budget is way more than the EMS budget, like in terms of staffing.
Exactly.
Yeah, you can speak into the mic. Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't. You also can't, like, if we don't have joint HR, you can't control like culture or anything such as that. And in these positions where, like, I assume burnout is rather high, much like teachers in education, the more control that you have, the better you can ensure that everyone around is there to serve your community and has the support systems in place.
Yeah, I don't know. I just think it introduces a lot of complications that potentially is a short-term solution. So I don't know. But that being said, I think if you go back, Chad, would you go back to the recommendation? I think at minimum, I agree that your recommendation. Yeah, not the efficiencies, the one before that. Oh, yeah. This one. So I mean, I think regardless, updating the IGA and hopefully being able to have a longer runway for implementing that so we can plan for it is step one, no matter what. I don't necessarily think I have a strong enough feeling to completely take other options off the table, but I would like to know how much it would cost to have our own district. Like, I think that would be an important thing for us to know. I think that's easier to figure out than to figure out the details of what a shared fire and EMS district is. That feels like there's way more unknowns there, and that while we could try to assess what the cost would be, I actually think it would be very challenging to even ascertain like the real number. But I get step one. I agree with your step one. I think it has to happen. So,
well, just to address some of your and Nicole's concerns, I've been involved with this district for a long time, and I was on the EMS commission for many years. And while there have been occasional disagreements among the city of Fitchburg, city of Verona, and town of Verona, they haven't been big disagreements. And I will tell you that when we decided to go from an EMTI service to a paramedic service, that was a 40% increase in the cost. And everybody was united that that's what we wanted to do. Even the town of Verona, who didn't know where they were going to get the money from, but we all found a way to make it happen because jointly we felt that going with a paramedic level service was what we needed because of I don't know, do they still use that 1 through 5 for determining the severity of a call, or is it A through E, or because of the number of those top severity calls that we were getting, we needed to have that level of service. And I don't think if it was just a Fitchburg service, we would have done it at that time. We may have done it by now, but I don't think we would have done it at that time. Because while it was a 40% increase in the district, it would have been a much higher cost for Fitchburg to do it alone. So, I get the thing about control. I totally get that position. I guess I come from a philosophy where I'm more interested in cooperation than control. And I think this district has served us well. We did talk about combining fire and EMS years ago. And again, the thing that held it up was the cost to Verona, because at that time, Verona didn't have any full-time firefighters. They had one chief. And so the cost for them to just the catching up was so high that they were like, yeah, no, that's not in the cards.
I wonder if a good first step for this as we move forward is, it would be interesting to know if Verona, because City of Verona would obviously be an important piece in combining the fire EMS district. It'd be interesting to know if they even have any interest in even discussing that. Because maybe they don't. I mean, I don't know. Yeah.
Well, we certainly could have that be part of our conversation with our partners as we talk about the updated IGA, assuming the Common Council is interested in providing that direction, that we need to get that updated. That definitely can be a topic of conversation to determine what interest is in either a combined fire and EMS district, or if in the conversations the mayor has had with the mayor of Verona, if they still feel that city-based might be their best long-term solution as well.
You know what I would love to have happen is a meeting where we get our council, the City of Verona's council, and Verona's town board in one room together just to chat about this and see what the interest is. I mean, having everybody in the same room has a lot of value instead of just, leaving it up to staff discussions or even just the mayor. I mean, we are all charged with running this city, as Verona's council members are charged with running theirs, and the town's board is charged with running theirs. So
I would love to understand leadership opinion before that happens, because I think at the end of the day, we are all elected officials and that is our charge. But I am not a fire chief. I have never fought a fire. I have never responded in an ambulance. And I don't think it needs to happen now, but I think at some point it would be great, because if we ever did what Jay was bringing up, which I don't necessarily think is a bad idea, I would just love to know from our team, right? It's such a foreign thing to me. I'd love to know what the leadership really feels like is the best thing for our city, and if there are random things that we're not even thinking about because we're not firefighters and paramedics. So I do think that's a really critical input before we do something like that. But
the other thing I would mention is, this is why we are doing this. We started as, we were approached by other municipalities. We had several meetings, and they presented their case to the council. We are doing this to you now, and there's so many steps in this process. So it could be, I don't know if it could be, feasible to have the three, municipality leaders, or councils, to have a discussion. I would like to see how it's going to look like. But I think we are doing taking all the steps that we need to have the conversation. As one of the things for sure is going to change is the funding formula, because I will say that Verona is asking. I don't think that they're asking something like unreasonable. If I were in Luke's position, I would do the same. I would say, hey, sure, our taxpayers are kind of funding that, part of your calls. You know what I mean? So this is what I say. They have been great because they know that. They know how to read the numbers. They have seen this for many years. I would say thank you, City of Verona. But eventually that one will come, and the agreement is going to be changed, because that one is coming. But if we change it, we are going to change. If we are going to put 2/3 of the money, as an accountant that I am, as an understanding how partnership work, we need to have, a portion, aligned to our contribution to the district. You know what I mean? That one for sure. And then, as I mentioned before, we can explore if we want to do because when I came to this conversation, in my mind, I had two options. It was the district, bring the two together, or city-led. But according to the conversation that I have participated, and the opinion of the fire chief of Verona, I think they are more inclined to a city-led. Okay, that's it. But it doesn't mean that we can explore the two, But I will say, I would say that if you give me an option right now, I would think that we need to explore the city-led, because I am thinking how our community is going to grow in the next 10 to 20 years. So we are making the decision for the future here.
So just to summarize, everyone, just in the interest of time, so it sounds like Nicole, the mayor, myself, would lean towards the recommendation on the screen here. Alder Allen is in the realm of preferring a fire and EMS joint district. Bill and Dave, do you want to just kind of be clear about where you? Okay, so Dave is more of in the fire and EMS district joint EMS fire and EMS joint district. Bill, do you have thoughts?
From an efficiency and a financial, economic perspective, I would think that the joint fire and EMS district would be the best option. But if there's, clashes of personality or differences in style that are just inherent in a system where, city of Fitchburg is just 20 times the size of the smaller entities, then, maybe it's going to work out better to have each city do their own. I don't know what the township is going to do in that instance. They'll, I feel like they would come out holding the short straw if everybody went their own way.
Yeah, and so we have three alders that are unfortunately not here to share their opinion, but this sounds like the beginning of a longer discussion that we're going to have to touch base on this again. So do you feel like you have what you need in terms of next steps? I mean, it sounds like it's a split.
Yeah, well, let me clarify what I think maybe the council is looking for. I do believe that the council supports an updated IGA in determining if that is achievable. That seems to be a clear indication.
All nodding heads. So.
Excellent. And I think what the council is also asking for, or at least some members are leaning towards, is a conversation with our existing district partners about what do they see as the long-term option. Do they have an interest in a joint fire district and fire and EMS district, or do they feel as though they're fine with the updated IGA and carrying that on, or would they prefer to do and explore city-led service or city-based service? So I think that can be part of our conversation with the other two district partners. And perhaps the third bullet point on this conversation then is, if the council, there at least seems to be some interest in exploration of city-based fire and EMS, and perhaps firming up the logistics and the costs a bit more to help, maybe determine direction in the long run. That's what I'm kind of taking, or more or less taking away from the feedback, but I don't want to step out of bounds here.
Does anyone want to disagree with that assessment? Nope. Okay.
I still want to know leadership opinions. But yes.
Yeah.
All of
Nicole's
those
leadership
too.
opinions.
I have a question. I think we have allocated some ARPA funds for a feasibility study. It was allocated by the previous mayor in the ARPA fund.
There is funding that has been identified through the ARPA TID conversation.
Yeah.
I don't know at what point in time it's appropriate to take a look at this from hiring an outside consultant. I believe that it's been studied several different times,
I know.
and I'm not sure that paying for another study is really going to be beneficial.
Yeah. Let's kind of yeah.
But it is available if, as maybe an option is honed in on and selected, that maybe it would make sense to consider utilizing that money.
Like a objective mind looking at this.
Right, to help with potential implementation or
Yeah.
further exploration of
Yeah.
one selected option. Who
Exactly.
knows? Yeah.
It sounds like we're good, we're clear.
Yeah, sounds like it. I appreciate the
Okay.
conversation and direction. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Administrator. Next item.
Before we move on from
Yeah.
I just wanted to address one thing, and that is we used to have the annual meeting of the EMS district.
We used to, yes.
And we used to require a quorum of all three governing bodies at that meeting. And so it is possible for us to all get in a room and talk about stuff. And that was when, I mean, one of those meetings is when we decided jointly with all three of these municipalities voting unanimously to go to the paramedic level service. So I think we can get everyone in a room and we can work through it without that much difficulty.
Okay.
Although our EMS chief is not believing that, apparently.
Yeah. All right, we're going to move on to agenda item 6C, referendum update and/or discussion. Chad, do we have any updates after last night?
The only thing I just want to add is you probably saw there was a media release that was put out by our communications consultant indicating that the Common Council had passed the resolution last evening and that there will be a question on the ballot. Also listed the dates, times, and locations of the community information sessions as well.
I want to clarify something. And the second, you said you sent two documents. One was with some questions and answers. So, if we are approached as a mayor and a council member for the reporters, I think we can answer. So the question is about if staff is approached by reporters, then when they need to. This is what I want to clarify. When they want to go to you or to Adam, what I mean? But we can, I think we have we have an idea how to answer them, what I mean? But I think because we are going to be approached by the reporters, so what I mean? So I want to clarify what is the role of the elders when they are approached by the media.
Deputy City Administrator Adam Sayre did provide some FAQs with some guidance that elected officials can use if you are engaged in conversations or someone does have an inquiry. Sure, you are obviously free to speak with the media or whomever you would like. As elected officials, you can advocate for whatever position you have related to the referendum. And if you do end up having a media conversation or interview, we would request that you at least let us know that that's happening, because our communications consultant would also want to know that that's happening as well. And perhaps they may be able to provide some additional assistance with talking points and those sorts of things if you feel you may benefit from that. As it relates to employees, employees have once again been reminded today that they may inform and educate, but they may not advocate, certainly while on city time minimally. And they've been instructed that if they feel comfortable answering questions that are, if they're out and about in our community and their approach, say, while they're doing maintenance in the parks or a firefighter walking to a call or whatever the case may be, if they feel comfortable answering a question that may be posed by a member of our community, they're welcome to do that, but they're not obligated to do that. If they don't feel comfortable, they've been advised that they don't have to answer those questions. They can politely and respectfully direct the person who's asking the questions to either Adam or I and the city website.
Thanks, Chad.
You're welcome.
I have just one comment about, I got all the emails from Lisa today about the public meetings. And I was a little surprised to see that we don't have anything scheduled at Doxa Church in the Southdale neighborhood, and the people who live there are going to have a hard time getting to the city hall or even to fire station number 3 for those meetings. But we have one scheduled on Adams Road.
Adams Road?
Yeah.
I thought that I told Adam to add.
There's one, the one on October 21st is at Four Winds Farm on Adams Road.
Oh, no.
So, yeah, we attempted to host one in-person listening session, information session in each of the aldermanic districts. We did look at Doxa Church specifically, and I believe there were some logistical challenges either by calendar and availability or technology that was a potential barrier there.
Well, it feels like there's a large constituency that's going to have real accessibility issues getting to these meetings, at one of these meetings.
Well, we again offer 3 virtual options as well.
Yeah.
Again, I recognize that there are barriers there also, but we tried to balance the best we could.
Everybody's needs.
All right, so we can move on to item 7A, announcements. Our next committee of the whole meeting is September 25th, 2024. I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And nays? Motion carries. We are adjourned at 9:30 p.m.